Welcome to the Client Success webinar series. We're so excited to have you again. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm assuming. That's great. Thank you for coming. We've got people from all over, from Brazil, from Seattle, Cleveland, Ohio, Dallas, Columbia, Casper, Wyoming. We got Josh, of course. You'll meet him later, from Bend, Oregon. We're so excited to have everybody here. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to just do, my name's Dave Blake, and I'm just going to do a little bit of initial welcome and logistics first. So now for those who may not know Client Success, we are the host of this webinar. Client Success is a leading customer success platform. We help customer success teams run their entire strategy from new to renew. So onboarding new customers, driving engagement and adoption, measuring customer health, and maximizing that post-sales revenue, including doing the renewal and expansion motions within Client Success. So we'd love, if you haven't heard of us, you haven't seen our platform, we'd love to introduce you to that at another time. Please reach out to us. One thing that we're super excited about is that we're excited about this opportunity that we just had, that we acquired a company called Baton. So Baton is a customer onboarding and collaboration platform. And so a lot of you are doing onboarding with your customers. You may be doing it in spreadsheets or different solutions. You may have one solution for your customer success team and another one for your implementation and onboarding team. Baton brings both those teams together and provides you a customer portal to collaboratively and transparently engage with your customers and go through your onboarding workflows and other repetitive projects that you may have with your customers. So if you haven't seen Baton, maybe you've seen Client Success, but you haven't seen Baton, you got to see Baton. We're so excited about it. We've seen some amazing results already in the first 90 days that since we've acquired Baton, and we're excited about adding that to our suite of products. All right, with that, we want to go ahead and bring Josh Crossman on. Josh, welcome today. We are excited to have Josh with us. Josh is the CEO of Magnify and based in Bend, Oregon, right, Josh?
You got it.
And we're so honored to have Josh here. He's a seasoned SaaS veteran CEO, has so much experience, and he's built a company called Magnify that we're excited about, talking about post-sales growth and automation at scale. So, Josh, welcome. How's the weather in Bend, Oregon today?
Well, it's fantastic. I think this is officially going to be the last day of fall before it turns. But we live in the West. You know this, Dave.
Yeah.
Like we've had, I think, 2 million acres of forest fires in Oregon. So like
Oh,
it's like
wow.
Mordor around here right now. It's just smoke everywhere. So
Oh man, I'm so sorry, and
yeah,
for all those impacted as well. But
yeah.
we're glad you're with us today. Josh, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and Magnify it first, and then let's jump into your content. We're excited to hear about it.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, as you mentioned, been doing this customer success role for a little while now. My background, founded Magnify a couple of years ago, but before that was a CS executive running customer success services, RevOps, onboarding all of those sorts of field pieces that aren't sales at a software company that was acquired by a public company, and then did this sort of something similar at another role where I worked with one of your colleagues, Christy,
Yeah.
uh, when we did that together at another company, sort of built the CS function from scratch, from ground zero. I think we've had 30 or 40 heads of CS come out of our teams over the years. And then before that, vice president GM at a public company, and spent about a decade with McKinsey doing services and consulting and things like that. So
Very well, very well. I love the background. So today we're talking about growth, automation, and scale. So we're excited about that. I'm gonna go off camera. I'm gonna run Q&A and chat for you, but I'm gonna for the audience. If you have questions, send them to the Q&A or to chat, primarily Q&A. And I'm going to jump in now and again to add to moderate some questions. But other than that, Josh, we'll see you in just a few minutes. I'll go off screen so you can go ahead with the presentation.
yeah, thanks again, Dave. Really excited to be here and grateful for our partners and friends at Client Success for the opportunity to share a little about what we think is a new approach to driving scale and post sales. So let's just get the thing fully presented. And if you can't see my screen, Dave, jump on and interrupt. Otherwise, I think we're good. All right. So what we're going to talk a lot about today is really what we're calling customer growth automation. And we think this is, as we mentioned, sort of a new paradigm to and a new tool in the toolkit for post-sales professionals. And it's really going to be about scale. It's going to be about helping manage and so much that we want to do in customer success, but don't always have the capability or, frankly, the resources to do so. So uh, let's see if we can get the thing to go. All right. So let's start off with sort of, we think there is a fundamental dilemma that we face in post-sales. And the challenge is this, is that our model doesn't scale. And so I'm just going to show you an example. These are real human beings that I've worked with. And let's imagine a woman named Helen. And Helen is your typical customer success manager, smart, capable, does great work. And she has a book of accounts. And, let's call it 20, 25 accounts that she's managing. And in 1 to 2 hours a week, she has to work with Nicole, her customer champion. And in there, she has to do a bunch of stuff, things like onboarding, training, goal mapping, regular calls, escalations, EBRs, Q&A, success documentation, and all the rest. And by the way, that's just external work that she's spending with Nicole. This doesn't count sort of the internal reporting, the internal management meetings, all of the stuff that we want to do. And hopefully that feels pretty familiar. That is the dominant paradigm of how customer success works. And it started off at Salesforce and a few other places, but primarily Salesforce about 15 or 20 years ago. Now, what happens is then this is the way the model works. The model works is Helen works with Nicole, and then Nicole goes and works with all of the users of that piece of software in her company. And so for a few hours a week, because Nicole has a day job, she has to enable all the other users in her company. And that could be anywhere from a few to dozens to even hundreds of users. And as you think about it, what happens in that world is that Nicole is going to do office hours. Maybe Helen holds an office hour as part of that. She's going to do some training, is going to send out some emails, and then hope that this thing gets deployed, this piece of software. Now, of course, it's not quite that simple, because this is actually what it actually looks like in the real world, is that you've got a bunch of other stakeholders in your organization and in Helen's organization and her company. You've got support, you've got sales, you've got services. There's the product dev team that wants to go ahead and engage and ask questions. You've got a PLG function that may be trying to drive growth or doing some sort of product-led motions in there. Maybe you've got a marketing team and they want to do webinars, or they want to do a set of communications. And so what quickly happens is that they're all talking to Helen. And then many of them are also talking to their customer champion, Nicole. And then many of them are talking directly out to those end users. Right. And this is how our customer success model works today. And, God bless Helen, she's doing everything she can to kind of keep everything organized and make sure it all fits. And we use great technologies like ClientSuccess or other CSPs to help manage all of that work that she has to do. But fundamentally, this is the state of the art in the client lifecycle, is that we've got this sort of tangled nest of interactions. And at the end of the day, it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale in the way that we want it. And that's not to take away from anything from the great work that CS is doing, but we need to think about a complementary approach. Now, this approach has created some real challenges for us as CS leaders. And I'm assuming that most of the folks on here have been doing client success or customer success for some time, and they're familiar with this paradigm. Number one is that usually at most accounts, I'm not saying this always, but most accounts, customer success, while we focus a ton on adoption, we don't drive adoption, at least not directly, right? What happens is we're talking to our champion, and maybe we're helping, in this case, Nicole, that champion, adopt the software, but really it's Nicole that's responsible for driving the adoption at her enterprise. And then secondly, it relies on a game of telephone. So we communicate to Nicole, Nicole communicates to her enterprise, to her users. And that creates opportunities for misunderstanding, for disconnects, for, people are busy, they've got lots on their plate, they don't catch all the detail, they don't understand your differentiators and nuance that you have in your product that you've worked so hard and you've crafted that PowerPoint 27 times over to make sure you've got the messaging just right. And then, of course, it doesn't always land in the way that you intend or imagine. And by the way, this model, I intentionally picked the 1 to 20, 1 to 25 leverage ratios very intentionally, because that's a very typical, I think, industry standard has somewhere around every CSM covering about $4 million in revenue, and somewhere between 20 to 30, maybe 35 accounts is kind of your industry average. And so what happens is that this doesn't scale down into SMB. And we've talked about this a bunch in lots of other places, is that we've got to create your tech touch segment or your digital scale segment or your digital growth segment or digital, your CS tech, SMB segment, like whatever it is that whatever nomenclature, whatever moniker you put on it, you can't have that 1 to 25 leverage ratios go down there. It just doesn't work. You have to have a 1 to 100, 1 to 200. In some cases, maybe you've got 1 to 1,000, 1 to several thousand accounts, and you work out some sort of pooled model. It also doesn't scale up to the largest segments. And it's exactly the diagram that you saw a little earlier, is that there's no way that Helen, the CSM, there's no way Helen, the CSM, can talk with all the users in Nicole's enterprise. She's got to go and talk with, just a few points of contact at any given company, because there are only so many hours in a work week. And then what this does is this puts a ton of cost pressure, right? We're going into Q4. Many of us are going into budgeting cycle right now. And I can't tell you the number of CS organizations I'm hearing that are talking about the cost pressure on their business, because you can't scale linearly with revenue. You're going to have to find ways to drive efficiencies. If we're doing this sort of same leverage ratios all the way through the book, it just doesn't work. And, on top of all of this, it's really hard to show ROI, because you're relying on these manual human interactions, which are really important, but it's very hard to sort of draw the direct line between Helen, our CSM, and user 27 that's 3 layers down in the organization that Helen's not interacting with. So hopefully this feels pretty familiar, and you're nodding your heads right now. Now, let's see if we can get the slides to advance here. Come on. There we go. Okay. So this is the challenge that we face. Great. This is a challenge that we face. And, layer all of this. So this is the model. This is what's going on. But the industry itself is at a bit of a crossroads. And this, I think, is really important for us to lay the groundwork for, because it's going to inform the conversations we're going to have later. So, number one, the cost structure of software, particularly including customer success, is changing. And what do I mean by that? Number one, even with the Fed cutting interest rates, it is unlikely, and there's lots of, who knows, what the future holds exactly. But at least as near as we can tell for the foreseeable future, interest rates are not going back down to an effective 0% in the midterm. And what that's going to mean is the investment world that we lived in from roughly 2014, 15 into kind of 2021 isn't going to be there. And what that means is that fundamentally capital is going to be tighter than it was in the decade that most of us built our customer success organizations in. Just let's lay that out. It's not going to be in the same way, and that's not likely to change in the near future. Secondly, cost pressures are going to push. You're all familiar with the rule of 40. If you add in your EBITDA and your growth rates, they should add up to about 40%. And what that means is that we're going to continue to feel cost pressure, particularly in customer success, because for most organizations, it's below the line. That means that it's considered a cost of goods sold. And so as a result, every CFO right now is asking, where am I going to find productivity? Where am I going to find efficiency? When you see a big headcount line like you see in CS, there's going to be cost pressure over time. And then thirdly, hiring is going to be constrained as a result. So the growth of CS jobs has slowed to an all-time low in the industry. And so we're going to hear, by the way, this was very familiar. It's a lot to talk about this in CS. We got to do more with less. You thought, if we can just get through the season, we won't. Well, if we just get through the season, we'll be okay. Well, it's not happening. You look at it year over year, there's only been a 3% increase in CS jobs, which is at an all-time low. If you look at that as sort of a revenue growth in software and other things, it's definitely pushing towards a real focus on productivity and decreased hiring for customer success. All right, so cost structures are changing. And by the way, there is this new model that is really taking hold in enterprise SaaS. And it may not be in your enterprise or in your software company right now, but rest assured, it's coming. We see right now, this is what's called usage-based or consumption pricing is trending right now. The latest studies we're seeing are somewhere over 80 plus percent. And I know this is from OpenView, and we don't have any 2024 data quite yet, but we are expecting usage-based pricing to take off just really at this point across the industry. I think I saw a statistic, 75% of enterprise SaaS companies are at least testing the consumption-based pricing. And the way consumption-based pricing works, it's just like, a Zoom model or AWS, where it's, how much you use is how much you get charged. And that a whole premise assumes that there is some level of end user adoption. And we're going to have to think about how we're going to model that and manage that in SaaS and in particular in customer success. All right. Thirdly, of course, as everybody knows, it's the topic of the day, but it is the thing that will likely be as big, if not bigger, than that thing we called the internet way back when in the World Wide Web in the late 90s and early aughts, is AI. And it is a massive shift that's going on, not just in the industry, but in society. And, a lot's been written on that. And this is not this talk, but it's absolutely going to have fundamental repercussions for the way we think about software and the way we think about our customers. And so just to kind of put the point on it, AI adoption is happening exponentially faster than any technology before it. Basically, technology adoption is following a power law. And if you look at it, original desktop-based software, way back when Intuit or EA or others took, decades to adopt a piece of software. And this is the fastest to 100 million users. And you can sort of see there was an era that was the PC era, and that took, decades of time. And then the internet happened. And very quickly, we get to a time of years, not decades. And then we get to mobile. And mobile started to happen even faster. And now it's getting to months, not years. And now you look at AI, it took ChatGPT 2 months to get to 100 million users. I mean, just think about that for a second. And I saw another chart at a recent conference where ChatGPT from a revenue, or excuse me, OpenAI and the ChatGPT app from a revenue perspective is 2 years ahead of Google in terms of its revenue. It's following the same revenue curve as Google did in the early days, and it's literally 2 years faster, which is why, of course, they can take down $7.5 billion in capital a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at it, it's just absolutely happening so quickly, and it is going to change the way we think about software and software adoption. Now, I also want to be clear that AI is not just one thing. That's like saying this internet thing. And really what AI is a category of technologies that is just beginning. And so even while we talk a lot about generative AI or LLMs or foundational models and all of that, really what we're talking about are a number of different types of technologies that are all going through each of their own hype cycles. And so as we think about all of this, like you say, oh, well, I'm over generative AI, like I understand it is, we'll get to it. Like it's going to go through its own trough of disillusionment, which is probably about where it is right now. We're getting close to it. And then what's going to happen is it's going to start to then move up back into that enlightenment and productivity phases. And there's a ton more coming, things like causal AI or AI simulation that'll be really interesting for us in enterprise software. Decision intelligence and action-based AI. There's lots of cool stuff that's still very much in its early innings, and we're going to see more and more of that happening over time. All right. So just to recap, that's a lot to throw at you to set context, but I think it's really important for us to understand what's going on in the industry. We're in the middle of us all sort of fighting our fires in our day jobs. So the CS model we've used for the last 15 years, while still important and still relevant, doesn't scale well, particularly to drive end user adoption. We're going to have economic cost pressures are going to continue for the foreseeable future, increasing the strain and pressure on CS. Consumption pricing, which relies on end user adoption, is becoming the dominant model in SaaS. And it's not quite there yet, but it's going to be over time, and it's certainly going to hit so many different companies. And then on top of that, we have a massively disruptive technology that's rapidly gaining traction in both our customer base and our industry. That is a lot for us to process. Okay, just be very clear. Like, this is a very interesting time for us to be in the field, very interesting time for us to be in customer success. You've got multiple forces at work. All right. So we think, and our contention is that it's time to expand our minds to be what's possible in customer success. And so we're going from two very different worlds with two very different types of people in our memes. And so we've got to really expand our mind around what's possible in CS. So we think there's a new era, and leaders are going to have to be ready in customer success. So the first era, era one, which, by the way, I don't think goes away. And I'm not saying that like CSMs are going away or anything like that, or being replaced by AI agents or Tesla robots or anything like that. But I think there is a shift that's going to be happening, and we have to be ready for this transition. So the first model said that was a human first foundation, and it said accounts per CSM or dollars per CSM, and it was all about how do we increase our account loads and how do we get consistent execution by humans, right? And I just want to be really clear. I don't think this goes away. And we've got to automate a few tasks or send a few emails. We'll create some, types of playbooks and things like that to help manage workload. And what we're going to do is we're going to do our best, because there's a lot of signal and there's a lot of noise, and we've got a lot of humans touching these accounts, is we're going to create risk ratings, red, yellow, green, to understand where to prioritize. And if you're like me, if you're any sort of growth company, you're constantly hiring to catch up on account loads. And so you always feel under-resourced and always trying to play catch up. And that was the world that we lived in for about the last decade, maybe, 15 years. Now, let's talk about era two. Era two is going to be all about digital scale. And it's going to be about automation. It's going to be about AI. And it just is. It's where the industry is clearly headed. And so it's going to be, how do we bring AI and automation first to scale? So we still need humans. It's important that we do that. But where do we start with those first? And then how do we scale after that? The humans are present and critical. They are reserved for the most important tasks. And I think it's a really important approach. I think there is a belief, and I think this is partly the hype cycle, that we're just going to replace everyone with some sort of digital hologram that's going to answer all of our questions for all of our customers. And it's just unrealistic, in the same way that like, oh, we're going to have self-driving cars in 2020, across all our streets, and like our kids will never need to get driver's licenses. Like, it's probably not the case. And so we've got to really think about what are the use cases and where we bring AI and automation in. Thirdly, ROI is going to be the currency of the realm. And we need to understand where our CS investments matter, and where can we show that we prevent churn, and where do we drive expansion, and how do we directly target that and directly measure it. And if we're not doing that, it's going to be harder and harder for us to justify the investments that we're seeing in people. And then finally, revenue forecasting. So moving from kind of a red, yellow, green scoring to a place where we're actually predicting revenue, just like we do in sales. So we think there are these two shifts that are going on. And so we ask ourselves, like, what if we as an industry could predict revenue 6 months ahead and just know? What if we could generate new upsell opportunities with a few clicks, automatically fix our at-risk accounts, get rid of all the repetitive work that poor Helen has to do all the time, and give her time back to focus on strategic work, and manage our scale accounts with automation? And so we think in order to do that, a new complementary approach is needed in post-sales. And so if you think about, let's think about pre-sales and draw the analog. In pre-sales, we have this notion of marketing automation. And in marketing automation, it is an omnichannel And we're automatically we're automatically scoring all of our prospects. We're moving to next best steps across all of our digital channels. We're knowing, oh, here's every prospect going through our marketing funnel. Do we send them a white paper? Do they see an ad? How many touches did they get? How many times did they interact? Oh, who's in a good spot? Okay, let's drop them down to a human first motion that we call sales. And sales uses a bunch of technologies we call CRM, and they manage their tasks and they have reporting and dashboards, and it's your system of record. And what we've done in customer success is rightly we've done the same thing in the post sales world, and we've done that latter piece. We've built great customer success platforms like ClientSuccess. And what they've done is they manage the tasks, they do reporting, they drive systems of record, and they have automation in them. And that's really the right place to do. But what we think is missing, or what's needed for all of us as leaders in CS, is to think about how do we drive a digital first one-to-many model that connects all of our disconnected systems, out-of-date models, and the occasional emails to customers. Like, what do we do? And so we think what this means is we're going to argue that there's a new category of software that's emerging, and lots of players out there and lots of folks doing stuff in this category, and CSPs are doing some work there, and other players are doing space, are in that space as well. But we think what's happening is it's going to move using AI, using automation to get to a real-time scoring of accounts and users, where it's saying what's the next best step for every single one of those accounts, what's the next best step for every user. It's automated, it's personalized, it's omni-system, omni-channel engagement to drive adoption. So we're not just relying on email, but we're doing stuff in-app, cross messaging. I mean, if you told me 7, 8 years ago that Slack and text would be the dominant ways that we would interact with our customer base, I'd say that's crazy. Like the security risks alone are like, what happens and how do I monitor that? And yet here we are where, most of our, in our world, like we see so many texts in between us and our customers and things like that. And so, we got to think about how we drive this digital first one-to-many motion at scale. All right. So the question is, okay, well, if we've gone through this before in marketing automation, what can we do in post sales and what can we learn from it? We think there are a few things. I think number one, it's both the account and the user. So much of our work in customer success and in post sales has been focused at the account level. What's the account health? What are these core metrics for the account? How is the account using it? And at the end of the day, what really is going to, if you want to change the account, you have to change the user. And so really, how do we get to the end user and drive adoption? Number two, score everyone and predict revenue, right? And so just like we do with MQLs and SQLs and pre-sales, we need to score everyone, every single user, every single account, and figure out where the revenue is going to be. And not just move to a red, yellow, green scoring, but ultimately get to a numerical quantification of what revenue is going to be, just like we do in marketing automation. Like we can take, if we have this many leads and this many prospects at this time in the funnel, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, here's what we think our likely close rate's going to be. Third, get everyone to the next best step. So it's about how do we drive everybody to that next action, that next place that they need to engage with our product, with our company, with our information, with our webinars, with our marketing. Use every channel. So we talk a lot about this, but it's managing all the interactions. So in-app, email, messaging, support, services, all the different pieces, CMS, LMS, you name it, we need to engage with all of them. Measure everything and show ROI. So this is we could take a page from our friends in marketing. They've done a really good job of marketing their discipline, of constantly saying, look, you give me $1 million more, Mr. CFO, and I'll generate $3 million more of pipeline for you. And the sales executive's like, yes, please. And the CEO is like, yes, please. Well, we need to measure everything and show that direct ROI. And then we test and iterate all the time. We're constantly testing and moving things along. So we think, therefore, customer growth, if we take all those lessons as 4 essential components, we think number one, it's about connecting all your data and systems, and not sort of a months-long process. With modern APIs, there are plenty of technologies out there to allow you to connect and orchestrate those systems and data in minutes. Then use AI to drive detailed recommendations on how to grow revenue. So like those next best steps. and then ultimately automate and manage scale across all the users. And so this is the place that I want to pause for a second and really get to this, especially 2 and 3. There ought to be a place now with the data that we have in SaaS. And I get that some companies have on-premise software, but I was on a phone call this morning with an on-premise software company, and even off support data alone, able to get to 70-80% accuracy in revenue prediction quarters ahead. I mean, the AI capabilities now that exist in the industry to predict revenue are getting smarter and smarter and better over time. And being able to identify signal from noise. And then if we then automatically connect those signals and connect those predictions to all of our channels. So triggering those emails, triggering those Slacks, those in-app notifications, tasks for CSMs, the support tickets that we need to, the knowledge-based CMS, all of that, it gives us the ability to automatically engage. And this, I think, is the new future paradigm for users. And I see a couple messages. I'm in full screen, so let's see if I can chat and see how good chat. There's a question here. Yep. Let me pause there. If you get, let me pause there. I'm going to go to one more example, but any questions for anybody?
We've got one, but one question, Josh. Maybe keep going, and I'll ask that in the next one.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. And then the fourth piece then is test and measure. And this is all, again, sort of learning from marketing automation, the ability to say quickly, how do we get that through line all the way through? We launched a campaign against these sets of accounts or these sets of users. We did a bunch of stuff that was automatic with technology, and then we did a bunch of stuff that was human. And here are the tasks that the CSMs were involved with. Here are the things, the automations that we did. And then, okay, let's track. What happened to that cohort of users? Did churn probability go down? Did expansion go up? How many accounts did we save? At this point, we're getting to a place with AI that we should be able to predict that pretty accurately and be able to say and track and measure that. And now all of a sudden, we're able to have a conversation with the CFO or the CEO or the CRO or whoever in the same way that we have that marketing has conversations with those executives, right? Like, hey, if you invest this much more in CS, here's how much more expansion we can drive, or here's what we can do to our churn rates and things like that. And here are the campaigns and the data points and the A/B tests that we did to prove it. And again, none of this sort of takes the place of good, solid account conversations and good account control and management and humans talking to humans, no more than marketing automation took the place of sales 15, 20 years ago. But it's time, our argument is that we need to bring that sort of paradigm back into the post-sales world as well.
Yeah, Josh, I'm going to jump in here. I'll be off screen a little bit, the voice from off screen, but I've got James. He's got a question. He says, I've created a renewal forecasting process for our business, but find that the biggest issue is getting detailed persona or user case-based health metrics, use case-based health metrics. Assume the problem is lack of attribution in data. Mm-hmm. Are there any tips to solve for this retroactively or to ensure hygiene going forward? So how do you have your health metrics based on and your forecasting based on detailed persona or use case based health metrics?
Yeah, I think I understand the question, and if I don't get it right, I didn't quite catch the name again, but just chat back in and let's hit it.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we get there. Very specifically, what's interesting, I mean, it depends a little on the size of the customer base and things like that. But you can slice the data relatively thinly if you have enough users and enough customers. So for example, you could look at things like by product line. So I know of one software company that says, hey, look, we've got product A, product B, product C, and they even have legacy products that they work with. And like, what are the relative weights of those products, and what does that mean, and how do we both engage with our users, and what does that do for churn and revenue forecasting over time? Also, you can start to think about role-based attribution. So maybe this is also a little bit of the question, but it's like, hey, I've got admins that are engaged, and I may have end users, for example, that are disengaged. And so what does that do? And so one of the things you can start to do is, this is where good sort of AI and machine learning models can really help you, is start to say, does it matter? Right? Like, what are those thresholds by persona where it starts to reduce the probabilities? And what happens is it starts to be attribution. So you start to say things like, hey, if you have more than X% of your end user base using feature A for 10 minutes a day, then your account's in pretty good shape. But if you don't have an admin in that mix, then that's going to create a churn risk that increases the churn probability by 27% or whatever the number is. As you start to get to those places where the model is going to start to like think through those for you and start to point out like where those opportunities are.
Okay, thank you. So
Yeah.
another attendee is asking, in an era of tool consolidation, how do you make the case to leadership that scale and the ability to build tech touch is essential and requires tools that facilitate one-to-many motions?
Yeah, I think I think that's exactly the conversations that we need to have. And so I think a few things. I think one, I don't know if we've already always done the best job in CS of sort of showing ROI, of our investments that we've done. And so let's assume for a second that this customer doesn't have usage-based pricing because let's say it's a newer concept, and let's make it a little harder. Let's say it's in just a standard annual subscription contract, for example. What's going to happen in that world if you're not touching those? And we did this, when I was a CS leader, we actually did this. We did this in our SMB segment. I actually did this for 2 quarters. Is I pulled CSMs off a portion of the user base or customer base, and I said, hey, for this SMB segment, here's what life is like without CS and all the other things that we've built in there. And here is the control group with them. And we did sort of an A/B test, and we found out that churn increased by about 15% in the ones that were not those SMB accounts that were not touched by CS. And then we did it a truly simple random sample. Like we made sure that it wasn't just the smallest customers in one and bigger in another. We actually truly made it random. And that 15%, when you scaled it across the base, gave us a pretty good ROI story of like, hey, wow, we actually have more room to invest in this segment than we thought we did because look what it did for our churn. And by the way, it's not just the 1 year, but then you start drawing out the NPV. Like, if the average lifespan in the segment is, 4 or 5 years, what's the revenue that happens in the out years too? Like you quickly get to some very big numbers. And so my argument would be that like, if we don't have the data, let's start building the data and doing those kinds of experiments to show what the impact would be.
Very cool. There's a few other questions, but I think some of them may be answered in your the slides coming up. So let's go forward, and then we'll get to those questions if not.
Yeah, it's great. All right. So one asks, do you have an example? So here's an example of a company that did this. And these are just like some conceptual screenshots of like what it would be. So what you would do, it's not their actual data or anything like that. So this is a DevOps software company. So they had about 70% of their accounts. It wasn't 70% of their revenue. So this was like their long tail segment that had pretty significant churn. It was all SMB. And they were struggling to try and figure out what they were going to do. And so what they did is they integrated their systems together. And so they hooked Salesforce to Pendo to Marketo to their CSP. And what they did is they used AI/ML to build a churn expansion prediction. And they got to about an 85% accuracy across both enterprise and SMB. Which was really fascinating. Like it wasn't that one was more accurate than another. Actually, it turned out that they were both about the same. And what they did is they identified a number of drivers to improve their net dollar retention. And one of the more interesting ones was there was a feature recommendation where it turns out that if an enterprise feature, so in this case, it was a particular integration and using sort of an alerting feature that they had in their product. If you did this alerts coupled with this integration, in SMB, which they had made a premium feature just for enterprise, and they spent a ton of time trying to get adopted enterprise. Turns out, if you did it in SMB, your retention rates went way the heck up, and in fact, even drove upsell. And so what they thought was something that was meant for the enterprise actually had tremendous value even down into their SMB segment. And so what they then did is they built a bunch of automated campaigns, and they weren't terribly sophisticated automated campaigns, right? It wasn't like they had, you know, it was, figured out a perpetual motion machine or solved, nuclear fusion here. They sent some emails and they built some in-app guides in Pendo, and sent some Slacks, and then also created opportunities in Salesforce for the sales reps. And they targeted those users and they said, hey, you know what? You could go get this feature that does this integration. And like, if you're interested, click here. And, the sales rep reached out and they did a free trial and got the feature turned on. And all of a sudden, retention rates started ticking up and some upsell opportunities closed. And it was really amazing what they did. And it wasn't tremendously complicated. Like, I'm not talking rocket science here, but it was that they were able to show for these portion of accounts, we launched this campaign, we identified this opportunity, launched this campaign, measured the ROI of it, saw what happened with churn, saw what happened with upsell, and wow, the CEO was like, yes, please give me more of that. I'd like that. Do that again. And that's the kind of sort of approach that we're talking about over time. And if you start to make that like as the dominant motion for the way you think about engaging with your customers at scale, it changes the physics of CS. Great. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes left, and happy to answer any other questions if anyone wants to engage. But we're going to do a little bit of an exercise, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be interactive. We're going to do some polling, do some chatting. It's going to be a lot of fun. And what I'm going to do, whoops, let's go the other way, is we're going to solve one of your toughest business problems in less than 10 minutes. Or we'll give you all of the registration fee that you paid for this right back to you. I'm making a joke because I actually don't know if Dave charged a registration fee, but I don't think he did. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve one of your toughest business problems in less than 10 minutes. And here's how it's going to go. I want you to think about what's the biggest challenge your CEO would say about your existing customer post-sales business. And we're going to give you three options. And if you go to your, I think it's your polling button in there, there's going to be a poll that pops up. And we're going to give you a few options. Is it about reducing churn? Is it about increasing expansion? Or is it a productivity question for you? Oh, and by the way, I think we posed the wrong quiz here. So if we could go back and maybe do that. And there we go. There we go. Perfect. Why don't you just pull in and see what's your biggest problem that we're going to see? Oh, this is kind of cool. I get to see it sort of move real time. It's like little stock tickers going back and forth. All right. It was churn in the lead. Now it's expansion. Expansion starting to take the pole position. Very interesting. Okay, cool. Well, I think we're getting to kind of least directional answers. It looks like about a third of you have reduced churn, a little less than a third have reduced churn. Over half of the folks have grow expansion. And then, sizable group still has to improve productivity, reduce cost. And then a few of you have other problems in your life. And I'm sorry for you as well. All right, let's say grow, churn, reduce expansion are kind of the two dominant stories in reduce, churn, grow, expansion. Let's do this. Okay, let's find a solution to those problems. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to imagine, let's suspend disbelief, set aside all the PTSD that you're going to have around bad data in Salesforce and disconnected data and dirty opportunity fields that aren't right and bad renewal dates and everything else, and all the systems don't talk to each other. Set that all aside. Imagine you've got a magic wand that connect and integrate all of your systems together and that you can design a campaign that you could launch in a week. Assume you've got all the content you need, that you can pull data from any system, you can ship that data to any other system and trigger actions in any system that you want. Okay, you can, for example, you can send emails and surveys to customers. You can do in-app guides. You can trigger tasks for CSMs, AEs, and support. You can do things in your LMS, your CMS. You got all of that stuff. You can open and close tickets and support, whatever you want to do. Okay, imagine you've got that. It's magic wand. Okay, now take the problem you picked, whether it was reduce churn or grow expansion or improve productivity. And let's imagine you're going to build an omni-channel, omni-system campaign using both automations and triggering actions for humans. Okay, imagine you could do that. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about what do you want that omni-system campaign to look like? What communications and content you want the customers to receive? What actions do you want the CS or support systems to take? And when does the customer graduate from the campaign? All right. So think about that. Like if you could just lay it out, almost like step 1, 2, 3, 4, what would I do? And I'll give you an example of this. So what you do is you could, trigger a task for a CSM or notify the CSM right away. You send them an alert and a notification, and it shows up in ClientSuccess for the CSM. Then send some emails. Maybe toss up a couple guides in Pendo. Maybe they get stuck. You send a support ticket. Think about all those things and sort of like just take 2 minutes and just sort of sketch that out. Maybe on a notepad, maybe on notes app, whatever your favorite thing is. And I bet you'll be able to write this. My money is that you're going to be able to write this in probably a few minutes. All right. Now, as you start to think about that, what you're going to start to realize is like, yeah, I think I'd want to do this. I think I could do that. I think I would do this. Oh, wait, I don't have any Pendo guides or I don't have an in-app notification system. Don't worry about that. Imagine you could. And like just go and do that. Or imagine you could turn on a feature in a product. I know one software company that turns on features on and off automatically based on support tickets and things that their customers are doing. So imagine you've got that ability. All right. Now that you're starting to get like, hey, here are a few of the steps they do, let's ask some questions for you. All right. I'm going to ask you on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being impossible, there's no way I could ever envision a world in which I could do this. And 10 being, yeah, I could think of 3 or 4 steps off the top of my head that I could probably write down in a minute or two. How hard was it to know what you wanted to do in your campaign? Scale of 0 to 10. Just go to your poll and sort of do that. I'm actually very curious. 0 being impossible and 10 being easy. What did I say? I'm not sure. Oh, interesting. I'm not going to say you did it, but they reversed the scale. So I'm sorry. I see here that ignore what's written there. Say 0 is hard and 10 is easy. I'm sorry. We've got different results in the campaign. So let's just do it like an NPS score, with 10 being awesome and 0 being bad. Okay, imagine that. So sorry, Yvette. Thanks for catching that. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding in the polling, so my bad. All right. All right. But let's say 0 is terrible and 10 is super easy to do. Think of it just like an NPS. 10 is good. How hard was it to know? And what's interesting is that, like, yeah, there's definitely, not a lot of zeros. Okay. All right. Now, would you want your campaign entirely digital, entirely human, or a mix? And here's what we quickly realized, that it is a mix of both. And this is where I think there's a little bit of like this belief that sort of AI is going to replace everything. I don't think it's true. I think there's going to be a lot of automation, but at the end of the day, we're still going to have humans engaging with humans. Okay. Now, keep going down. Were there elements of the campaign that you wanted to test? And the answer is, of course there were. It's a layup. Yes, absolutely. Because we don't know everything. But if we start to build these out and we measure them and have those kinds of reports on them, we're going to be able to quickly say which work and which don't. All right, last question. And do you think you'd be able to measure the impact of the campaign? And the answer is, yeah, it looks like, 4 out of 5 could say they could probably measure the impact of the campaign. And so, it's just that simple. What you'd be able to do is let's go build that campaign, and then you start to do those actions. And then ultimately you can transform the way you think about engaging with customers at scale and drive growth. All right. So that's sort of the bulk of the content of the webinar. I just want to say thanks everybody for joining us. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If you want to learn more about what we do at Magnify, visit us at magnify.io. Follow us on LinkedIn. That's the QR code right there. And if you just want to ask questions of me, feel free to toss me an email and just send it. That's my direct email. I'll do my best. I probably need my own automation to handle my email box sometimes, but we'll get back to you. And really appreciate the time with everybody engaging.
Josh, do we have time for two or three questions? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it. Super interesting. So So one question was just a basic question, or how are AI and automation used differently for plays? Is AI different than automation? Are they one and the same, or there's there overlap? Maybe answer that just from a high
Yeah,
level.
it's a good question. I mean, they are different. I mean, automation is just if this, then that. And
Mhm.
so it's okay, let me automatically trigger something based off of some sort of input into a system and have some sort of mechanistic output there. Now you can layer AI into it. So for example, you could say, if they respond this way, machine, could you please go write a personalized email and generate the copy for it?
Mhm.
Or you could have AI as input. So if, AI model says, this is a risk factor, then do this or do that. And so you can start to get to some very interesting things. There's lots of good stuff that's going on, for instance, in support land around ticket deflection and sort of answering those things, answering questions and sort of trying to do deflections, answering questions.
Yep.
So there's definitely places there, but automation is different than AI directly.
Okay. Then the next one from Angela is when we talk about scaled CSM, are you mainly referring to one to many approach, or is it much broader than that? Don't you think?
Yeah, I do think it is. I think you're right, David. I think it is bigger than that. It's because, remember sort of the story we told of Helen and Nicole and all the end users at the
Yeah.
very beginning. It's not just, oh, well, now I can cover 72 accounts, whereas before I could cover 50. It's actually, how do I get out to the hundreds, thousands of users in my book and engage with them and make them, those end users, successful in ways that, one human being just can't scale to.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Like, I think that there's a play in the traditional high touch world. You can still leverage some of these strategies because it allows you to be able to focus on those really needed personal connections. Whereas technology can help you in a very personalized way to scale across your customers, or to do tasks, or to drive engagement in different ways. So
That's right.
I'm with you on that. How about, let's see, one other question. If somebody is on premise, how do I make this work with an on premise solution?
Yeah, it
Raphael's
is.
got that problem.
Yeah, it is. It is a harder problem for sure. Let's just,
Yeah.
it's no use kind of pretending that it's not. But it is a solvable problem. So as I said, there are signals that one gets. So there are things like support tickets. So for example, I know one, like I think I was telling the story earlier, that there is an on-premise software company that built some models, and they were able to predict with like reasonable accuracy. It's not as good as if you've got telemetry and in true SaaS-based, analytics, but with pretty high accuracy in the high 70s, low 80s, like, this account's at risk. And it was things like, you know what? This account hasn't set a support ticket in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's probably not great. And then, by the way, you still have communication out to them. You still have emails, other communication channels. You can do webinars. There's all sorts of other ways that we interact with them, community, LMS. And so all of those exist. It is harder, but it's not, that nut can be cracked.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Well, Josh, this is super, super interesting. Thank you for sharing your experience, your thought leadership, and all that you're doing at Magnify. We're grateful that you join us today. Um, I'm going to any last words or piece of advice, Josh, as
No,
we
I
head to
just want to
bed?
say thank you, Dave, for
Yeah,
you and ClientSuccess. You guys do great work, and always love the community that you've built, and tremendous piece of software. So thank you for allowing us to join you today.
great. Thanks, Josh. We're grateful for the partnership as well. So check out Josh. You got his information on the last screen. Thankful that all of you were able to join us today. We want you to come back. We do these every Tuesday. The next one is super cool. It's Roger Mendez at Cisco. He's talking about building a customer operations team. Then the following week we have Todd Kirk and Casey Trujillo of Brainstorm, who will be talking about cutting your customer onboarding in half. I'm super interested to hear what they have to say and their best practices and playbooks there. So for those of you who have joined us, come back the next 2 weeks. There should be a registration link in the chat that you can go and register right now. But between now and then, we hope you have a great week. We're here. The Client Success team is always here for you to help as a trusted partner as you build and scale your customer success team and organization. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.